then I'll give you your deed. Okay? The whole purchase price has been paid already. It's a sales contract between buyer and seller, but the deed doesn't come till the back end. Buyer faithfully makes his payments every month. Hopes like hell this guy really owns this thing. Hope at the back end he'll give me a deed like he said he would. Not a good thing for a buyer. It's for unsophisticated buyers who can't qualify for a loan with a third-party lender, who can't even come up with the $10,000 cash down so that the seller is willing to give him a deed because at least the seller got $10,000. It's simply, buyer, yeah, I know you can only time pay, so time pay me every month, and when you're finished and I've gotten every last drop of blood out of you, then I'll give you the deed. And buyer takes his chances that, what did I say, 60 payments from now, that 5 years from now? Sure hope he owns that property. Sure hope there aren't any liens on it. Sure hope there's not already a mortgage on there. Not a good thing for buyer. And buyer usually doesn't record. If buyer is sophisticated, he records his agreement for deed, and at least that'll keep seller from putting a mortgage on it.
Okay.
But otherwise, this is unrecorded. Nobody knows this out there. Hell, this guy, he can have deeded, he can get a mortgage, he can deed it to somebody, he can do all kinds of stuff. This poor schmuck's still paying him $1,000 every month. He doesn't know. That's called a contract for deed. Now, what it is then, defined as a contract between a buyer and seller, where the buyer promises to make periodic payments towards the purchase price, and the seller promises to convey the property after the last installment has been paid. It's not good for a buyer. It can be very good for a seller, because nothing shows in the public records. The seller tries to sell it to somebody else. Now, the guy's probably in possession. That should stop him. But if he's not, seller could go ahead and deed it to somebody else, and they'd never even know this poor guy existed. Or seller can get a loan. So if it's not recorded, it's very good for the seller. Now, what these contracts say is the following. In scary language, they say, if at any time, Mr. Buyer, you miss a payment, you have forfeited all of your rights, you never get a deed, all the money you paid me for all those months constitutes rent, and you're out of here. And fortunately for most sellers, their unsophisticated buyers read that in the contract after he shows it to them after they missed a few payments and go, oh, okay, and pack up and leave. That's great for the seller. He's received $30,000 of these $30,000 of these $1,000 a month payments. He can start over with another guy and sell it again, if the buyer packs up and leaves. Now, yes, ma'am.
What if he went out of his way? Like, is it possible for the buyer to sue, for example, if the seller went out of his way to make it more difficult for him in order to make his payments?
Is it possible for the buyer to sue the seller to do what?
If the seller tries to make it difficult for him to make his payments.
Well,
Like
the
changing
buyer
the
could
payment
sue him and
arrangements.
make him take his payments. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, you could. The seller's going to take the payments. Here's the important thing I want you to realize, and this is the other important point in this section. In most states, they agree with those onerous provisions that I told you, that say that seller is allowed to say, yep, it was rent, you used it up, got to live there, you forfeited the balance, you're out, it's over, you're gone. Florida does not allow that. Florida says this is a mortgage. We have a statute that says specifically that a contract for deed is a mortgage and it must be foreclosed like a mortgage. And the only way you can wipe one out is to go through a foreclosure procedure, just like a foreclosing a mortgage, to take the property away from the buyer. Now, that makes them less attractive in Florida because the seller can't just go in and evict the buyer and say, you're out of here, see the contract said it was rent, you're done, you missed your shot, you're never getting a deed, you're gone. Florida law says you can't do that to people who know that Florida law says that you can't do that. If you follow what I'm saying. The poor unsophisticated buyer doesn't know that. And he lets the seller show him this thing and says, yep, it was rent, now you're gone, you gotta get out. So he packs up and he gets out. And then, there's nothing in the public records. Seller has had title all this time. Nobody knows this thing even existed. The seller can do it to somebody else again, and again, and again. But at any time that a buyer says, no, wait a minute, I'm here, and I paid $30,000 towards the price, and I'm not leaving. Then our law says the only way the seller can get him out is to foreclose. And then the buyer in the foreclosure proceeding can claim an equity of redemption and say, hey, you know, I got 30 grand into this, I only owe him 20 more, Your Honor, let me pay him the 20 more and make him give me a deed. The buyer can do all that, but not if he doesn't know that he has a right to do all that, and most of them don't.
Is this like the process of rent to own with other, is rent to own the concept that's used promotionally on these type of deals?
Well, rent to own,
or rent with the option to buy?
you see, that's what I'm getting at. I'm about to say. Rent with option to buy is a totally different thing.
Okay.
Rent with an option to buy is a lease with a sales contract attached that says, I'm going to lease the property for such and such an amount. And at any time, I have the option to purchase pursuant to the terms of the sales contract. I, the tenant, have the right to purchase pursuant to the sales contract. And that my rent payments will apply towards the purchase price. Okay, that's a very legitimate concept, and that makes sense. That's not what this is. A lot of property upstate, around Sebring, Lake Placid, middle of the state, vacant lots that were platted in the old days out of orange groves that were never developed, sell under these land contracts. Foreigners love it. Foreigners come into Florida and, oh, for $100 a month I can own an acre on a lake in the middle of Florida. They do it. And the sellers love it because the contract never gets recorded. If the people quit paying, well, they sell it to somebody else, and then they sell it to somebody else. Ultimately, if anybody ever does make all those payments, then they deed it to them. You know, there are legitimate guys who do business this way. I'm not suggesting that it's all bad. It's just that it attracts normally an unsophisticated buyer who is not able to at least make enough of a cash down payment. It's like ads on TV to sign and drive a car. You don't have to pay anything down right now. All you got to do is sign. That's what this is about. All you got to do is sign and promise to pay me $1,000 next month, and maybe someday you'll get a deal.
But aren't these contracts over a year? It should, like Florida statutes require that to be.
It's in writing.
It's in writing.
Oh, okay.
Oh, hell, it's very much in writing. It's
it's
a
not a
sales
public
contract in writing every bit as much as this is in writing.
Okay.
It's just that it doesn't call for the deed at the closing. It calls for the deed 5 years later, when the payments are all made.
How are taxes handled in a situation like that?
Tax accounting?
Yes.
Is that what you asked?
Yes.
That's a good question. That's all about installment sales and the installment sales under the IRS code. The materials, as far as I'm concerned, don't put this very well because they make it sound like a big benefit of doing this is that it creates an installment sale for the seller. This creates an installment sale for the seller too. Any sales transaction where the seller doesn't get all of his money at the closing creates an installment sale. This does, and this does, but the materials only talk about it in this chapter as if it were a big tax advantage just doing this way. But this is every bit as much of an installment sale. This is an installment sale that started out with 0. Well, this is an installment sale that started out with 10, but it's an installment sale as to the next 40. So I'm not going to get into how you report an installment sale, but you know, a portion of every dollar you receive is return to basis, and a portion is gain, and all that kind of stuff. But you pay as you go. You pay as you get.
I understand that.
Okay, that is.
There's one point.
Two contracts.
That's it. That's all I'm going to talk about on land contracts. I'm going to suggest we all take a 5-minute restroom break, and then we'll get ready for the exam.
You know, I think there's actually
Or
one
3
back
minutes.
at the end of yeah, right there. Believe it or not.
Two things to tell you about in the contract for you. Number one, how do you foreclose?
Mike, how you feeling?
Can you kick them out, or do you have to foreclose?
From day one, Slurpees. Maybe, yeah. Joe. Want to come up there? They up there. Are you guys going? Yeah, I mean, it's 4:30. It's coming a little time. This thing only took like 30 minutes.
Yeah, it depends how long.
There's 35 questions in it's going to take a little longer, but it's not that.
Yeah, so even if it's 3:45, 4 o'clock.
Basic elements to contract. Offer acceptance.
Consideration, capacity,
Legality.
legality. There you go.
I'm already screwed.
What?
I said, I don't know.
I lose.
They gave me their money. So I think. Yeah, I had 89. I thought 89 plus. Be like at
It might be
85.
like 90. It might be like 90, isn't it?
Hey, what was that question for?
Elements of a
Mike,
contract.
what was that question for?
Elements of a contract.
Elements of contract.
Legality, capacity, offer, acceptance.
The closing mortgages. RESPA, what it stands for.
What is that?
Real estate.
Capacity. What is it? Hey. Offer acceptance.
You don't know my name.
No, yeah, I'm going through it. Trying to crash study.
Real estate.
Offer, acceptance, capacity, legality.
Say it out loud so I can hear it.
There's the other one, there's before capacity.
Consideration.
Oh,
Mark.
I'm not gonna do it on this one.
There's more to it than that.
Consideration.
I'm worried about what it's called.
Don't forget capacity, guys. Who is it?
Oh, it's his phone.
He's getting text messages,
I
right?
used to.
Capacity, lawful purpose.
Wait, what's that?
It's the notice that you want, which you have actually acquired, and then which you say you don't know it's not.
That it's on the public record? Okay. Flat, rectangular. I think those are pretty obvious. I'm just scared of you know what I mean? What are the
What answers did you get out of it? Got them all. Alright, so send that to me. Text me,
You own the
quickly.
bottom, they own the bottom, you own the top, you're on the leaf, if you're in a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And then, what's the other part?
Conservation.
Yeah,
right of operation.
Right to
Right, no, right of operation. Operation.
Robert, would you kill that? Please. My friend said to kill it now. He's gonna come get it around 3, I hear. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
cut.
you.